So Lenny, actually, this word Mēnis, that's a very special word for anger. We've seen it in the first line of the Iliad. I know you've thought a lot about that. Can you want to talk about that here?
It's a special word in that it applies to situations in which people break a taboo, okay? Cross a boundary that they shouldn't be crossing. And there are several boundaries in this passage. There's the wall that Apollo is standing on and defending. There's the fact that Apollo himself is drawing a boundary between Patroklos and Achilles and saying that you're not Achilles, okay? And then he goes a step further and he says even Achilles won't be able to cross this wall, right? So it's about setting boundaries, and if you incur the anger of Apollo, it's a devastating thing not only for you but for your social group as well. So it's a massive kind of anger on a cosmic level to avoid.
And Greg, what about this phrase, equal to a daimon?
It's one of the most mystical phrases, I think, in all of Homeric poetry. And we know that a daimon is some superhuman force that we don't fully understand. By contrast with a theos, theos you can simply translate as God, and you're expected to know the name of the god, the functions of the god, and so on. When you use the word daimon, it's when you're not sure. That's why there's an expression in Homeric Greek, daimonia, which means, oh, you possessed by a daimon. But what it really means is, what's gotten into you? You can't tell what the force is. And that's already a puzzle here, because when we compare text A and text B, it's pretty clear that Patroklos is facing down the god Apollo himself, and that he's made the big mistake of rushing at Apollo 4 times. And the first time is a dress rehearsal, that's what we see here, and then the second time in text B, it's for real. First time he backs off, second time he doesn't back off. This just accentuates the importance of the whole scene, but you'd say, well, then if this is a climactic moment of god-hero antagonism, then the daimon must be Apollo. But why use the word daimon and not theos here? So there's something mystical here, and we can talk back and forth quite a bit about this, but it's also true that for a generic warrior, when a generic warrior dies in a heroic situation, then you can say, well, this is god-hero antagonism, and that the divine antagonist is Arēs by virtue of being the god of war. End of story. But in the case of Achilles, and more directly in the case of Patroklos, who vicariously experiences what Achilles will experience offstage when Achilles dies, in the case of these two heroes, they have a personalized divine antagonist, and that's Apollo. And in fact, Achilles looks just like Apollo whenever we see Achilles described in the Iliad. Long blonde hair, no beard yet. That's the way, the default way to imagine Achilles in the Iliad, not necessarily in all vase paintings, but in the Iliad. And so, sure, by virtue of being warriors, both Patroklos and then later on Achilles will die at the hand of Apollo. Apollo is the direct cause of their death. You could say that Apollo kills them, even if it's through various kinds of intermediacy. But still, that's the primary divine antagonist. But you can also say they're still warriors, and they're still part of the warrior ethic, and they're still likewise being killed by Arēs. So I think the expression Daimoni Īsos makes it even better. This expression concentrates on the basic fact of god-hero antagonism without getting into the details about what role what god has in the super spectacular death of Patroklos, which will mirror the even more super spectacular death of Achilles that is just too unbearable for the Iliad to relate, and that has to be reserved for another moment of narration, which does not happen in our Iliad.
the other aspect of it, and this is another aspect of the Mēnis, is that when you're like a god, you're in an incredibly empowered situation, but it's also a dangerous situation.
It's as dangerous as it gets.
So that's another boundary, and that's maybe the overarching reason why Apollo is there, to assert that difference, right? And that's what incurs the Mēnis of Apollo.
That's right. It certainly ratchets up the situation. Yes. It accentuates it. It intensifies it. And it's no ordinary warrior death in the world of heroes. This is extraordinary.